Rick.
Welcome to DXD governance discussion for Wednesday, November 30th, 1600 UTC, and happy to the last day of November before the last month of 2022. I will share my screen now and show the agenda here. So where is this? Yeah, we'll do the proposal roundup there. You can kind of see some Mainnet and Gnosis Chain proposals there. And then a couple of discussion items. I want to do a quick rundown of the ENS DAO update. It was kind of a very busy week in ENS DAO land. They had a very exciting, exciting proposal on an endowment fund manager there. Little discussion on contributor payments and a fake cowswap discussion, which we'll get into. And then, maybe some two meaty things that we want to carve some time out to is one, the proposal to upgrade the DXD token model that's been discussion for a long time. This is the output from the DXD token working group. And then this is, it's been up in the forum, I think, for almost 2 weeks, about 12 days there, and there have been some updates there. So I just want to see if there's any other final questions before trying to move forward with that. As part of the proposal, there is the to upgrade the DXD contract. So and then the last thing, two, is also go over the Operations Guild H1 2023 budget proposal. So this includes, this was posted in the forum a couple of days ago. It includes what we've kind of previously used as the governance squad, the contributor X squad, the treasury squad, and then also a legal component, kind of re-kicking that off. And so we'll get into the specifics on that, and hopefully that'll be kind of the first one of a couple of the different guilds that are submitting their budgets over the next week or two here. So let's start with the proposal roundup, and really three types of proposals here you can see. So maybe one, let's start with this registered new contribution reward from ARC. And so this was submitted by Adam, and this was discussion last week elsewhere on a previous one. So I guess, Adam, to confirm here, this is based on the DAO ARC project. So it's the exact same contribution reward scheme that was previously been used, except for it just blocked the element to submit proposals with multiple periods. And this was submitted a couple days ago through the same system. So it'll be actually, I think it was last week. So it's got 11 more days to be voted on. But Adam, anything in particular here to add or deny or confirm what I was saying?
Just that I failed to deploy this contract initially because I manually rebuilt the entire contract within the deployed contract. Then I went to ARC and then compiled that contract using their Solidity version, and now it's there. So I might request refund for those deployments.
Yeah, definitely. I think that will be reimbursed. Anyone else having problems with audio? Or are you all able to hear my lovely, smooth, crooning voice? Okay, good. Awesome. Any other thoughts on this? Will be, as I said, it'll be another 11 days, so we'll circle back on it next week. It already has a vote for by D Labs here in the affirmative. And then the two other proposals, maybe start with this cowswap order DAI DXD. So there's two of these in here. So this is basically just trying to do the DXD purchases through using stablecoins as opposed to ETH. It's a little bit trickier on Mainnet to do that because you have to use this multi-call scheme that takes 16 days to do. So these are two orders that are in there that will be in there for a week here. I guess this first one here is finishing 8 days there. So and then the third set of proposals are a series of DXD vesting payout contracts. So these are, I think Sky has one proposal that combines, I think this is July 2021 and December 2021. And this, I can't remember the starting date of November 21, which is, I think, an average of that date. And then
not an average, but it's if we do 2-month proposals, you're supposed to start it from the beginning of the proposal period, and so November 1st is is the beginning of the last period. So it's actually like Dave did, is delaying the first two to the last one, basically. Yeah. Just easier to easier
And Dave,
to
is that the same thing here? But I guess you had
he delayed each one to like the last month rather than the last period of the month of the period.
got it.
He's like Dave could have done 1 month earlier for those and still be like delayed correctly. But
Got it. Yeah, and these were enabled or empowered, I think, with the help of Ali, who does a great job of tracking all this stuff, and we've been kind of gotten a better system for that. And so coordinating with her on that, if you're looking to get your DXD payments there's also ways that people are doing in terms of people who do not use vesting contracts that are just getting them from the DAO itself once they are vested themselves, and we can kind of help out with the calculation there. Some people, there's a concern about like when you're doing compensation for the tax year. So I can imagine that some maybe are coming in January at the beginning of the year for payments there. So maybe something to think about if you're a contributor and want to get your DXD vesting contract set up. Hopefully, eventually with Davi, we'll have this more automated. Cool. And that was it for Mainnet. There was an ENS proposal over the week there too. So that passed there, but it's already been executed. Was actually having some trouble this morning just connecting wallet on Gnosis Chain on the GitHub one here, actually. No problem with the mainnet, but I actually cleared cache before that, and it's still there. But yeah, so Gnosis Chain actually a little bit quieter this time. We have a cowswap with DXD order. I think we have 2 there. One is pending boost here, and then we have a DAI payout for Federico that is for actually for the month of May there that he previously had. And then there is Milton contributor proposal there, who's doing some work on been doing great work with DXgov, especially on like kind of taking more on the smart contract area. And then there is Violet. There's a couple. Violet and Adam are in the boosting stage. Violet just needs someone to push it over the line there, whereas Adams has to wait 21 hours until it will be properly boosted. And yeah, those are the proposals on Gnosis Chain. Wasn't sure if there were any other thoughts, comments on the live proposals out. Ooh, Adam's proposal. Oh, wow. Yeah, just looking at this now, Adam, I haven't had a chance. So it's like makes no calls here.
I didn't think you could submit a proposal without having it do something, right?
My guess is he didn't submit this to the UI.
Really?
Yeah, it was on the UI.
Weird.
If you transaction, it's all of the values getting passed are just 0. So I think DXgov is interpreting that as nothing happening, essentially. Which I guess is kind of a bug. But
I mean, you could say that's what a signal proposal should have. I guess I remember on Alchemy Sky, you always had to at least have 1 rep or like 1 gen or 1 DAI or something as a reward to submit the proposal. But that
I thought in signal proposals on DXvote, people often do or have been doing that almost all the time as well. I thought you had to actually.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, think about it. Yeah. Cool. Anyway, interesting note there. Adam, I assume you'll want a different proposal for actually the payment and the rep. Awesome. And then moving on to discussion items. First, just wanted to give an update on the ENS endowment fund manager selection. So I don't know if anyone was been following this. We gave an update on it on this call last week. So ENS is been looking for someone to help out with their treasury, specifically someone to kind of like, they have, I think, about $25 million worth of ETH and about $12 million worth of USDC. They want to have a manager basically to be able to like ensure that the DAO and ENS can function in perpetuity. So this has been a pretty elaborate process in terms of having an RFP or request for proposal, trying to get all the different managers to submit plans to ENS. Then the ENS like governance stewards, the DAO governance steward whittled it down to a couple different choices. And then there were 3 different choices that they whittled it down to. And then they put it for a snapshot vote amongst those. And it was itself a pretty interesting snapshot vote. I think we'll have the link right here. Because the vote options were the 3 options, and then they were also none of the above, right? So you could say if you don't think ENS should have any endowment manager or any fund manager kind of looking after the treasury, you can vote none of the above. The other tricky thing or interesting thing about this was it was ranked choice voting. So it wasn't just that you were voting for one, you were also putting the order of your ranking there. So this actually made it very difficult to be able to determine who actually won or who was winning at the time of that, because it wasn't just, you could have someone who voted none of the above, but that wasn't the important one. The important one was who they voted second. So the final winner was Kapartki, who those in the DXDAO community will probably be aware of. We've talked to them about doing some things with the DXDAO treasury ourselves, and they wanted like a very, very close race. None of the above was actually like the second place. And then Avant-Garde was third, and then Llama was fourth. And the way that it was, it works is basically when you are fourth, you are like eliminated from the voting, and then your second, all of those people who voted the fourth place person first, their votes are then split amongst the first 3, and then that happens again at third. Whoever is in third in that place is like eliminated, and then the votes of those people, the third and fourth votes, or the second, third, and fourth votes of those people are then distributed to the first 2. And then the final one is whoever has the votes from that. So yeah, it was a long vote. And so DXDAO, of course, has a $46,000 $46,000 ENS that is delegated to Candy Fork. Candy Fork is about 1,500 ENS itself too. So there was about 47.5K ENS that Candy Fork voted with Kapartki number 1, and then Avant-Garde number 2, Llama 3, and none of the above 4. That was after consulting on this call, and there was also a poll in the DAO talk on the process there. And yeah, so anyway, that was kind of an interesting development there. I think there was a lot of discussion on Twitter about like, does a DAO need a treasury manager, and do you need to have this like professionalization of it, which I thought was interesting. I think DXDAO has done it's been a shining example in some of the treasury stuff it's done, and I think ENS DAO is also pushing forward this and wanting to have more non-custodial treasury management, and that was some of the discussion there. There was also a lot of discussion on the actual voting of this, both that it was ranked choice voting, which was confusing kind of for people to follow along. And it was also kind of strategic in terms of who you voted for. And then also what happens with a lot of these public big votes is how the votes play out end up influencing how later people kind of vote on that. So like, because you come at the beginning and you can see here what everyone votes for, that ends up having an effect on people voting. So that's something that people were talking about there. And yeah, so anyway, that was like an interesting thing there. I don't know if anyone had any questions or comments on that.
Yeah, I was following it, and I talked with Chris about it a little bit, but interestingly, the 2 biggest voters voted none of the above. I think that there is still, so this is just a signal vote, right? So this doesn't actually action any movement of money. It doesn't have all of the exact details on how the actual treasury management will progress. Like obviously the proposals are detailed, but they don't have all the details. And the total size, I guess. One of the things was people wanted to start smaller, and like just like DXDAO, we always want to start smaller and test some stuff, and then we could always ramp up. But this was like a signal proposal for like a whole big chunk of the treasury, and some people just probably voted against it because that's like all or nothing, and like all or nothing is scary in blockchain DAO world. Now the question is going to be, and it's awesome that Karpathy, I think, at least won this signal proposal, but now the steps on how they implement like actual strategies, how they do things in hope. Some people really want fully non-custodial. There are options that are semi non-custodial and all that. And so how it actually progresses from here is actually going to be a good learning experience, and is actually going to inform DXDAO on what is possible in the space currently and what needs to be built in the space currently. And I think it's a lot of the same topics that were raised when DXDAO talked to Karpathy about a similar idea. And so this, especially on like a bigger stage, is gonna be a good lesson for how this thing can move forward. And then at some point, there's going to be, depending on what the actions are that move forward, there's going to be more proposals that actually have to move the money and how much money and all that into certain places, whether that's Zodiac multi-sigs or safes or whatever. And there's going to be additional discussion when those actual proposals that move money happen, in my opinion. And so I think it will be very interesting to keep following how it progresses, and then we can learn from it, and we could take a bunch of the things that we see and hopefully experiment in the DXDAO treasury as well.
Yeah, and actually, I think Nick just posted like maybe what would be the first of that execution of this. And so the way that ENS works is that you have like the signal proposal, but they also do have executables themselves because they are like an on-chain DAO. And so this one would basically do that and set it up. And so you can see here, they actually do have the specific amounts. Basically, it's I think 16 million USD, but that's from the ETH that they're initially using. They'll create a one-to-one multi-sig that's controlled by the DAO, and then they'll use the Zodiac role for that. And yeah, it's actually pretty specific, I think, in terms of like what and who can control that. And Nick is a very competent engineer too, so I kind of trust him on this. So yeah, I think this is actually like the first example of anyone besides DXDAO using like this type of non-custodial management. Maybe some of the stuff on like Avant-Garde they've done with other ones, but I'm not sure if they've like worked with the DAO that's fully on chain like ENS or DXDAO. But yeah, this one was just submitted, I think, yesterday. So it's like a follow-up to that there. And so yeah, it'll be interesting to follow along.
Is that moving the full amount into this one-of-one safe control that's fully controlled by ENS DAO?
Yeah, so it says on a regular, it will sweep ETH into the multi-sig, convert enough USDC or DAI to top up the DAO's account to 16 million USD. Yeah. Anyway, let's do it. We can kind of dive into this. This is just like a discussion here, so maybe we can talk offline about it, or anyone else who's interested in the ENS DAO stuff. Yeah, and then just another thing, ENS, they did have an ENS small grants vote yesterday, and so for that's something that happens every month. The top 5 winners get 1 ETH each. So Nimi, I think, has won that before, but if you have anyone that is like participating in that, make sure and reach out and I can vote on that. I try to go through the ones and pick out the ones that are most interesting or that I've kind of known before. So like pre-domain, Nimi, they didn't. They got a bigger grant though. I can't remember. This is the small grants. But pre-domain, I did vote for that. So maybe someone there. Yeah, and then next discussion item, I wanted to talk about an unfortunate situation that happened to one of the contributors. We can kind of maybe talk more specific if we need to, but I guess the TLDR is after receiving a payment from DXDAO, I believe on Gnosis Chain, and then I think it was an XDAI, and wanting to convert this into USDC or another currency for the off ramp. The contributor Googled cowswap, and the top choice on cowswap is actually not cowswap. It's a different one. This is, I think it's a Google ad, but it's a scam basically by cowswap. And so this contributor put all their funds in to that, and then kind of noticed quickly after that that they were gone. And so this contributor basically 16,000 XI that was lost through this way, through the cowswap scam there. So just wanted to kind of open the discussion here on kind of what to do. There is some precedent for this. About a year and a half ago, someone had a wallet that was compromised, and it was, I think, for a payment for like 3,500 XDAI or something like that. And that was recouped by the DAO itself. 16,000 is a bit higher number for that. And in terms of like setting a precedent for, people getting hacked and then being able to recruit things from the DAO, there is something there too. So I don't know if maybe we want to have, if there's like a percentage number that in terms of like reimbursement or recouping those losses there. And I know this like specifically because it happens to cowswap, that's like something that I've heard from other people, and especially on like the Google thing there. Always, again, of course, a reminder to make sure you're verifying all URLs and everything with you're doing that. But yeah, happy to talk more specifically offline, or if someone wants to specifically say something here, but maybe just wanted to gauge some reaction from y'all now.
Yeah, from my side, these things can happen even if you are a new contributor on DXDAO. So yeah, let's see. Definitely there are, I think DXDAO should help once we understand what happened, the transaction, what was shared with me. And I could see that also we should use Swapper for that. I could see how the attack was, how the attack happened. I remember, I think it happened like a few weeks ago, right? So also, in addition to this, we should highlight these attacks, or these, this attack is an attack where you share a malicious URL and being able to appear on Google. So let's add it on the contributor documents, or let's try to communicate how this attack can happen and try to remember this so we don't see it happening again. For now, I think this should be compensated, maybe isn't entirely, and if not, with a very small penalty. But yeah, this is my take on this. Let's make sure that we communicate this to new contributors so it doesn't happen again.
Just some comments in the chat, or a lot of comments in the chat. As we said, use Swapper. You can get cowswap there. Also agree with Ross. Some of the URLs that Gnosis they kind of have been switching a lot. The safe one is one that really scares me a lot. They're switching that like a safe.global there. And then, yeah, I mean, this is kind of being vigilant here. But one of the things I really do like about Swapper is that it is just swapr.eth. Boom, or like .limo, and I feel like very confident with that. I guess .limo is another thing to think about, but yeah, being vigilant there. Yeah, any other thoughts on this? I imagine we'll kind of try to gain some consensus on like kind of how to move forward, make a post about it, and like kind of proposal there on what exactly to move. Cow.fi is actually good, but yeah, any other thoughts here? Cool. Okay, next up on the discussion items is proposal to upgrade DXD Token Model. So this has been up, as I said, the output of the DXD Token Working Group, as we had this draft up at the end of the week before Thanksgiving, or I guess 2 weeks ago, so it's about 12 days there. And there's been some discussion, some little changes here, there, but I think it's ready to be submitted to a vote on proposal, or sorry, to be submitted as a formal proposal and planning to do it basically on like everywhere. So we'll do a DXD snapshot, we'll do mainnet, we'll do Gnosis Chain, maybe not Arbitrum, but yeah. So we'll do that and hoping to get that out today. So I wanted to open up any other kind of comments in there and feedback. Just as a TLDR of what it really does is kind of it establishes 4 tools in DXD monetary policy framework. One big thing it kind of does is, I guess the TLDR is it affirms that DXD gets its value from DXDAO's treasury, which grows from product revenue and its investment into decentralized technology. So it's really linking the treasury and DXD in a way there. And then there's kind of the implementation of that through this monetary policy framework that's dictated by the DXD Monetary Policy Committee. And then the last element that I also think is important is because this kind of relationship in terms of DXDAO and DXD is changing to kind of reaffirm the social contract in terms of funding development for decentralization. So that's part of it there with the 6% commitment there. And then, the implementation of this is kind of maybe the key point here to think about is that it would, I just made an edit of that and that has a typo. That's 70% of NAV. So that this is this DXD NAV ratio. So basically the DXD circulating market cap divided by the treasury, committing DXDAO to buy DXD if DXD is trading below 70% of that there. Also making DXDAO a more active liquidity provider. Here you can see through a step-by-step process of increasing liquidity on Swapper. It does not specify whether this is in Gnosis Chain or Mainnet but I think probably we could think about both, but Mainnet is probably the bigger priority. And then it has some commitments to inverse bonds, which was kind of one of the discussions happening late in this. And then the last thing, as mentioned earlier, it would actually commit to upgrading the DXD token contract. So right now the DXD contract is actually just the bonding curve contract that is controlled by the DAO, but it also has the 2,500 ETH in it from the buyback reserve, and it also has a couple other random things that were sent to the buyback curve. So it would upgrade that there. The last kind of couple comments, I guess, were made. I made a couple changes yesterday. So kind of clarified some stuff on the NAV calculation and how that was written before. Added a 1 million 2-year set of inverse bonds at 100% after the kind of the commitment by Molotov and C-Man, and then adjusted the numbers on the DXDAO liquidity section just to make it a little bit step more there. And then just kind of really further define the NAV and treasury, the DXD NAV ratio and the treasury NAV, the wording on that. And then, just some of the comments more recently have kind of more focused on execution of this, which I think is also important. We have a bunch of different options. We can kind of maybe talk about that there. And then the other discussion, I'm just reading it here, is would like to know from C-Man 3, which is another discussion, would like to know why there's a spending limit on the inverse bonds. So this is not a spending limit. It's basically like a floor. It's saying DXDAO is committed to issuing these, but obviously could issue those further. And in the proposal, like the way that the structure would be set up is basically the DXD Monetary Policy Committee is coming up with what inverse bonds to issue. But since we don't have that structure set up now, I'm a little hesitant to come up with a lot of specifics on what those inverse bonds might look like. But what we want to do in this proposal is just give some commitment, a base level commitment for what those would be. And so that's what I think those are there, but it in no way is like a limit on what the bonds could be. It's basically just like establishing some commitment until the DXD Monetary Policy Committee, which will have like a more formal process for coming up this, more integrated with like DXD holders in terms of what they're thinking of. They'll be able to come up with like specifics on potentially how to expand it there. And kind of it's the way that I think, as Sky was saying, DXDAO operates. A lot of ways we kind of like want to slowly inch our way into this, and I think these inverse bonds are like a really actually an interesting idea for how it will affect the market. And so with all the dynamics there, I think just kind of slowly working our way into that. Cool. Yeah, and I said the discussion on the execution. There's Mesa. There's cowswap on Mainnet. Cowswap on Gnosis Chain. There's maybe like a couple other things, but there's Yearn. There's also this something from Mimic that is interesting that we may be able to use too. I think it's all very important, but I don't think that is required for this to move forward in terms of like the proposal for this. The execution of it will likely require some more specifics on that. And I was talking to Dave before the call. It's like DXDAO has already purchased 15,000 DXD in a trustless manner. So like I think it's pretty confident that if DXDAO puts out this signal proposal and approves this model, that like it will follow through on that and be able to purchase the DXD in whatever way it can in a trustless manner, just as it's kind of proven it's done over the last 18 months.
Chris, the spreadsheet that you had attached, like the final link out to a spreadsheet, which that goes through a path of on the actual dashboard. Yeah, that thing. If you continue, and I think Dave, maybe you were looking at this too. If you continued that down, like all the way, I guess it's like the hypothetical end state of where you could end up with the treasury if you keep the 70%. Is that, do you see that as a possibility, or is like very unlikely, or if that got to that state and almost all the DXD was bought back, it leaves the treasury, because it's compounding at 70%, I guess. Is that right, Dave? That it could leave the treasury at almost nothing? Is that very unlikely? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, just to run through. So this is, I don't know, Dave can hop in after this, but like I was just extending that a little bit. So basically all this is doing here is like calculating, basically taking a certain amount of DXD out of the supply through purchasing it at 70%. And when you do that, you do two things. One, you take out that DXD off of the market, and two, you decrease the value of the treasury, right? So the DXD that's off the market, that changes the numerator in the DXD NAV ratio, which is the DXD circulating market cap. So you change the numerator there, and then changing the treasury value changes that there. Like each time you're doing that, you're actually increasing that number a bit, because when you're buying DXD, you're buying it at below book value. So that's why you can see here, if we're using this kind of one DXD share of treasury here, that if there were 3,000 DXD bought at the current 70% of treasury NAV, which is this right here, this may not include ETH numbers that have changed in like the last 12 hours or something, but you would have, it would be 889. So that would mean that if DXDAO purchased 3,000 DXD at $889, what would that do to the DXD circulating market cap and the treasury supply? So we can see here, it would decrease the circulating supply by 3,000, pretty simple. And then it would decrease the treasury value by like almost $2 million, so like 1.9. But as a DXD holder, like this is good for you because your value goes up, right? And so you can see, if we just run this scenario out, what if people just keep selling at that 70%, right? And so each time this is happening, the treasury is kind of going down, which affects product development, right? Which isn't good, or the funding for that. But the DXD share of the treasury is going up too. So as a DXD holder, you're actually getting like more value there. And you think of who the DXD holders are. A lot of the DXD holders, they're out there. There's also a lot of DXD that's vested to contributors for that. And so you could see that if people just kept selling DXD at 70% of NAV, that it eventually, and I'm just like going down here, right? I guess you would sell something like 28,000 DXD to get to $10 million of the treasury. But like 28,000 DXD is, a lot. That's like 85% of the circulating supply. And I guess so I'd say two things in terms of like, this is a concern. So one, every time a DXD holder is selling at 70%, it means that they are like less optimistic about being able to like reap a value from DXD and DXDAO. So that's like a signal that is important for DXDAO to have in terms of like, is it building products? Is it building the right products? Is it investing in like the right things? So like when people are at 70%, if people are selling a lot at 70%, that's a way of they're trying to exit the system. And I think it should be a signal to DXDAO of like, how can we make sure that we try to like keep these people into the system and actually get them like a higher return on that. And then the second thing is it makes sense as a DXD holder, though, to hold while others sell at 70%, right? So you can see here that as a DXD holder, you don't need to do anything. You don't even need to rely on DXDAO to produce additional revenue. If people are selling at 70%, that's like automatically increasing your DXD value because it's decreasing the circulating supply. And it's also decreasing the treasury, but it's decreasing the circulating supply by more amount. So your DXD share of the treasury is actually growing. So that itself is an incentive to hold. And then, of course, like the last thing I would say, sorry, just one more to that is this is the kind of point of inverse bonds. Is this is a way to try to make a market for people that want to like exit at a higher amount, but willing to like lock up their DXD for that, which again is kind of like a way of an investment there. Yeah, so this would not include DXD right here. So this is the treasury value X DXD. I don't think it's very helpful to look at the DXD in the treasury as any type of value. So I would never count that actually as part of the treasury value. And actually, if you look at in the proposal, I can't remember if it's, Yeah, it would. So it's decreasing the circulating market supply. Yes, it's going to the DXDAO's treasury, but to me, like I think that you're looking at treasury value. It's only non-DXD assets. I mean, like DXDAO actually has so much DXD because it minted like 100,000 in the initial stages that it's not so much that there needs to be even like more DXD. It's more to me about like what DXD is outside of DXDAO. Like that's the circulating supply. Yeah, and just Dave saying confidence in DXDAO, delivering good products. Like I think this is especially true when you think about like we get into governance 2.0 and people wanting to stake their DXD for more governance power. That's going to be them locking it up there for hopeful because it's going to be like a higher return on it. The inverse bonds are basically a way to like unlock some of that NAV value, some of that there without like, draining kind of the treasury in this way. Yeah, I think all of those are trying to basically create the right incentive mechanisms to enable like great products being built that are decentralized, but also kind of make some return for DXDAO and then in return for DXD holders. Yeah, I mean, so in the question is when is the 6% product spend taken out of the NAV? Yeah, so the proposal has this in here in terms of a commitment for 6%. This is kind of the way it's worded here. You can say this percentage can be changed at any time by governance and represents an overall budget suggestion for DXDAO and is not a mandate to spend that amount nor a maximum amount. So this is, I think we're still kind of setting this out. So I think the 6% is kind of more of like a ballpark figure there and is not necessarily going to be very rigid for right now, especially we're doing these kind of like budgets there. And it changes a lot, of course, for like the treasury, like the price of ETH changes so much that would change your funding for the whole year because the price of ETH like went up like a week before you were doing like the proposal there. So I think like it's really hard to commit to a specific number on this because of that, but I kind of just want to have like the structure of committing to that. And then an initial stage is kind of like just a shelling point for us, but then maybe long term, there's a way to like harden that into a more like specific mandate. But like, I don't think we're there yet in terms of like coming up with the process to manage that. Yeah, I do. Yeah. David saying makes pressure to redeem before the 2023 budget even higher. I think this is true and kind of like, the dynamics that are going on here. DXDAO is doing a lot of things moving forward, like a new budget is going to be funding that. So if you preload the budget there, that will affect the value of the treasury because it's in the guild itself. Something I'm just thinking out loud about now would be maybe we should include the treasury of the guilds themselves in this. It probably would be pretty minimal, but something to think about. I guess it's not really owned by DXDAO. But specifically to your question, Dave, about like the 2023 budget and affecting NAV, in those proposals, they are only doing 3 months of, so you're getting approval for like the whole 6 months, but you're actually only you're sending only the first 3 months of that. So it is like a smaller amount. So it'd only be like a quarter there. So it wouldn't be like a huge change, but it would definitely be like a small change in the treasury there. No, so Ross, I'm not sure how that's happening. So just to reiterate, this is not DXD in the treasury. This is all ETH and stables and everything else. And like, I don't consider DXD to be valuable in the treasury without anything else in the treasury. It's the value of one DXD circulating as a share of the treasury would continue to go up. But if people are exiting the system, yeah, then that's what they're kind of selling. And like, yeah, you could, I mean, even, I'm just looking at this here, like, I mean, I think Candy Fork has 500 DXD. So if we just ran for this and I was like, if everyone else sold here, I can't do it here. Right. If there was everyone, oh no, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this function heavily is dependent on the intervals of updating the 70% NAV price, right? It's like here you're assuming we updated every 1,000 DXD sold, the NAV is updated, right? But in reality, right now we're like at 2 weeks, and like I think that's like really the biggest variable. Like if you were to do 500 period sells or larger, it really changes the whole equation, right? Because it's that 30% premium that goes to the DAO and is distributed among DXD holders. If you update it dynamically, ultimately the DAO would remain. DXD holders would get more out of it theoretically if it's like per DXD amount. So I think that's like the biggest variable. And right now, I think it's like it says like at least bi-weekly that would be updated. So it really depends how much is sold in every interval of the update, you know. So it's like difficult to project out.
Yeah, and I liked what you just said there, like the 30% premium that's distributed to DXD holders, because like that's what's happening each time, right? Someone's selling it for 70%. That means that 30% is like almost like a profit, and that is basically being distributed to the remaining DXD holders that are out there. And yeah, just talking about the automation of the NAV and doing the buyback. So Dave and I were just talking about this before. There's actually something maybe we could do with Mimic. Mimic, we talked about they're building some like treasury infrastructure there. So we're talking with them this week about that. In terms of calculating that, we're still figuring out how we will execute this in the initial stages. But like if we do Mesa, like, and maybe we're doing orders for the first week that we're like just calculating manually from there. But I'm just trying to figure out how to like set this up. But anyway, this is a good discussion. I think the actual execution of it in terms of where it happens will require a lot more coordination and follow up. I think the things that Sky and Ross are asking about are also very important in terms of like how this will affect the treasury there. And you could see that, yeah, I mean, I'm just running through this at the end. Like if all the DXD holders sold and there was only 300 DXD left, well, let's say 500 DXD left, like the person, each DXD would automatically be worth 3,600 DXD. So it's hard to predict exactly how this will work because there's an incentive to kind of wait for others to sell because you get the distribution of those products. But yeah, it will basically decrease the overall size of the treasury while increasing one DXD share of the treasury. Yeah. Okay. Good discussion. I want to keep diving in, but we have another great topic, and I don't want to keep people here too much longer. So, yeah, any other kind of thoughts on this, please leave in the forum, comments there. All the execution on this is really important. We can figure that out, but I do want to try to get this out for a vote by the end of the day. Awesome. Sorry. Yeah, and then the next item is Operations Guild H1 2023 budget proposal. So this is a draft proposal for a operations guild. So we talked, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, about this budgetary cycle and putting some processes on that build off the work that was done for the phase 2 proposal, which says that DXDAO should switch away from using individual contributor proposals and into squad-based budgeting here. And the distinction we're moving on here with these budgeting is this idea that like guilds are things that receive funding from DXDAO and can have multiple squads underneath it there. And so it's kind of creating almost like another layer there. And so that's like the terminology here. So this operations guild that we're proposing here basically has the existing governance, contributor X, and treasury squads, while also expanding into like kind of growing the legal squad there. So wanted to just kind of quickly go over this, and you know, both people ask questions about it, and then also yeah, will maybe be a model or kind of a reference point for others that are considering their squads here. So yeah, the exciting thing about this process is we're not just switching to a budgetary cycle, we're also using DXDAO's or DXgov's own governance platform, Davi, to do this. And so as opposed to using multi-sigs to distribute these funds, we actually get to leverage the soul-bound governance that is enabled through Davi there. And so here, you basically would have to set your initial soul-bound percentage. Of course, I'm saying soul-bound here instead of reputation, which is what DXDAO uses. It's the same thing. It's non-transferable governance power. But I think in terms of Davi and looking for other DAOs to copy this, we should be using the terminology soul-bound. So I've been committing to that. So anyways, this is a proposal of basically the 5 members of existing members, or the initial members of the Operations Guild, and how their voting power would split. So Caney, Fork, D Labs, Dave, Melanie, Skymine Labs, and Ali. So the numbers here were basically determined off of like both how long you've been in DXDAO, and then how much have you been contributing to governance there. And so like Caney Fork has kind of been, I guess, contributing the longest on governance, and that's a focus there. We're sorry, for operations, focusing on operations. And like, you know, and same with Dave and Melanie kind of joining the 20% there. And then Ali's been part-time, but has the 10%. And then Sky's been really active in terms of governance kind of from the beginning, but he's also had some other responsibilities there. And these are the initial governance rules. So something like you cannot earn additional governance power past 25%. This is akin to DXDAO's cannot earn past 4%. Then 1 month of full-time contributions to operations guilds earns 2.5% of sold-out governance power in the operations guild. This is the 0.1667% that we have for DXDAO kind of applied here. So if you just kind of run out these, what would happen here is, you know, if Jarek is onboarded and I think his time is at 15 or 20% in this, you know, he would earn like 1%, and then Ali would earn like 1%, Sky would earn 1 or something like that too, and you would automatically start like inflating away, right? And so I think probably after 2 months, yeah, I guess 2 months, Melanie would already hit 25%. But that would probably also deflate me down to 25% or whatever. But then maybe at that point we have other people coming in the operations guild, and you can kind of start this rep distribution there. So I think this is like a kind of basic foundation, but hopefully one that can move on going forward. Yeah, and then we just have the vision and mission there, and you kind of read these overall. Don't need to go into the specifics of them that much. And then I did want to go into the actual budget link here. So this is, yeah, as I said, this is proposing for the contributor X, governance, treasury, and the legal component. And so the members, actually, let me skip to the bottom here. Yeah, so I said these are the members of the Operations Guild, and this would kind of what they would be working on. You can kind of read about that there. And as I said, Jarek, who's been on these calls a lot and did the DXC legal assessment, I'm hoping he can kind of come on and do some work on the legal side there. So in total, that would be estimated 22,800 in contributor regular cost, right? So this would be the compensation for those contributors that I just mentioned there. Over every month, and that would be 6,700 other regular costs. And this is, we can look at the other cost here. You can see we have like $5,000 for outside legal, paying for governance stewards. We'll get to that in just a second. Event sponsors, which I actually think maybe we should take off of this. There's some edits we need to do here, but that's for the contributor X. You can see for contributor X, there's some other ones. And then for all of these budget proposals, and for this one in particular, all of the costs are broken down to the cost proposals are broken onto what's called regular costs and what's called contingency costs. So regular costs are ones we know that those are happening. We know the people that are going to work on it. We have the resources. We don't need to find anyone else to do. Those can be like baked in. There's no other questions really about it. Contingency costs are ones that we think we will need, or we like the plan that we will need, but it's not clear that we're going to actually be able to like execute on that and find that. We're not clear that we have the plan to be able to do that, or the person to be able to like kind of execute on that. And so you can see here, this is one of the things, the contingency cost is for the recruiting cost there. This would be in potential if some contributors that get rewards for recruiting other contributors, those might pay out in those 6 months based on some time that's spent there. So that's the contingency there. And then, yeah, if we just kind of look at it, you can also do the contingency on the contributor level. So one of the things I have in here is looking for a new treasury manager. So with the NIMI kind of proposal, Dave's actually been already at like reduced capacity on treasury the last couple months, and will be that way for the next couple months more. But I think at some point we're going to need to have someone that can take over those big shoes. And so we're going to start, I wanted to plan that and put it into this budget here. So you can see here, this is, we kind of put it as the contingency cost because we haven't yet found this person. We're not sure exactly when it would be. Proposing maybe like a level 5 there. And because they would only be, say, 5 months there, because maybe we'd find them in January or February or something. For that, we're budgeting $5,800 a month for that, but it's a contingency cost there. And so when the actual funding amount is sent for all of these guilds, only the regular cost will be sent, and they'll only be sent in the 3-month increments. So if you have a contingency cost, that will be approved in the budget, in the guild budget, but you'll actually have to come back to DXDAO to actually execute on that going forward once you have more specifics on what it actually is you're going to spend the money on. And you can think about this as a way of like, yes, DXDAO thinks we should spend money on this, but we're not really ready to send the money for this until we have more specifics and confidence really that like the money will be executed in this way. So that's, as I said, compensation here. And you can see I included Sky here at 20% for governance. Sky has also been helping contributor X a bit too. So I kind of just, since the operations guild, I just kind of combine that. But I think Sky, you know, is someone that, whether it's like multi-sigs or kind of on these calls, has been very, very active there. And I think going forward, we want to make sure that there are kind of some people that continue to be involved. Whenever guild governance, I did just want to do a comparison. Augusto, would you like to speak?
Yeah. We already talked about this on Keybase with you and Mainnet increase. So it turns out that developer operations has no squad, and this is something that I've been working on the past months on DXgov, and I'm planning to be part of the DXgov squad, 20 hours a week. And also my idea was to propose add another squad here on this operations guild for developers operations, where I'm going to be part of, and add also an extra contingency cost where that we can use for a future hire of a Solidity security researcher or some security advisor or researcher that we have been looking into DXgov too. So yeah, this will help me a lot because developer operations, this is something that has been happening since the beginning in DXgov, and it's quite important. And if not, I will have to create my own guild and everything. And this looks like a right place to have a developer operations squad, DevOps squad that I can be part of. and have 20 hours a week, and add also that contingency cost for, again, a security researcher, advisor. I think that it will be good later with Melanie to put up a job description, just like we did with the Solidity developer that we will be onboarding hopefully this month for Swapper, and to start looking for a security advisor researcher to join us in the developer operator, in the DevOps guild or DevOps squad. So yeah, I just wanted to hear if someone has any thought or is against that, because I'm actually alone right now. I don't have any squad or anything set up, so this seems like a right place.
Yeah, and as we're going to go through this process, we have to make decisions, like hard decisions about things that were maybe in like a middle ground or a flexible like location, and we could still be flexible with the execution of this, and like still have people kind of float from squad to squad or have cross squad interaction here. But we just want to come up with like a clear structure for how that is done, and so that means like, where is work being funded from, and how is that ultimately being held accountable by governance? And so I think what Augusto is talking about is we kind of have this like developer operations or like security. And so where would that fit in this world? And so, yeah, Augusto and I talked about that a little bit. And so I think we could maybe come up with a new proposal or an updated proposal, I guess, for this that includes that amount. And it would be some of Augusto's time, and then also like, yeah, some contingency costs on like building out, I think, the security and developer operations part next year, not just Augusto for that, but like being able to bring someone else and maybe a couple other people for that, but something in the contingency budget there. So that would potentially change actually what I'm about to say here, which is, yeah, this is just comparing the amounts, as you can see here. So this is comparing the amounts from like what happened in 2022 for those squads. You can see the contributor payments were a little bit higher there. The other regular cost was much higher there. A lot of that is because of some of the retreat stuff there, and then there. And I guess, Venki, I think that makes sense. The question is like, who's going to run it and do that? So I think we have to figure out for all of these, like, who is going to be ultimately responsible for that, and how that like chain of command works on that. So let's get to the operations, I guess the developer operations in a second. I just want to go through the existing budget as it is now. So you can see there's a bit of decrease here for that. Some of that is because of like the treasury person is not is more of a contingency cost that can kind of be more there. The other component is, as I said, there was a bunch of like the DX retreat, and some of the infinite costs were borne by contributor X. So that's why contributor X, and the coordinate costs were borne by contributor X. So those were a bit higher. So that's why that's lower there. And yeah, and then I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about before, yeah, I mean, I guess again, I don't really want to go one by one on the key milestones and goals right now, but these are really kind of specific things. And so I would appreciate if people kind of went through and gave some thought to them. I'll go over them, review in a second. I just wanted to get a description of this governance steward program idea out there, which I think is a change in how we're funding things. So if we look at how we've done expenses over the last year and a half, we've had a certain percentage for some people carved out for governance. So I was mentioning before, Sky's like always kind of worked on governance in addition to some of the other things he's worked on. But we also had a lot of the squad leads, and also lots of people on this call that are contributors devoting, say, 5 to 10% of their time to governance, because this does take time to come to this call, to look over these things, to vote on things on change. So we want to be able to continue to encourage that. So the question is kind of is how, right? So would we be paying other people to try to commit to that, or what way do we want to encourage existing contributors to still actively participate in DXDAO governance, and how do we kind of compensate for that? This also brings up, I think, another challenge, which is having like a lot of rep holders that maybe have moved on, or maybe will move on in the future. Like, how can we keep them engaged in DXDAO governance as a voice, and I think more importantly, pay them for that. And this is a program, the governance steward program, that would, I think, be the first step to really paying for good governance. And this is something I think a lot of DAOs try to do. A lot of these big DeFi DAOs think about it, but you always run into the problem of being able to game the system. The benefit for DXDAO is because we have reputation, we can use that as a very effective curation tool and say, okay, anyone above 0.5% rep that fulfills these items ends up getting, can qualify for this program to get paid for governance in that way. And so the other two conditions would be basically to attend 8 governance calls out of, I think, a possible 24. Maybe that can be higher to 10 or 12. And then vote on at least one proposal per month for 6 total. And this would be basically up to like a 1,500 budgetary periods. That's over 6 months of people keeping people engaged in that. As I said, people could still abuse this, right? You could like kind of want to participate in this and then just get the $1,500 and run. But I think we can keep it pretty small at first and try to encourage others to participate. And then if anyone is not paying attention or is not really doing anything, then they won't get that kind of extended going forward. So I think this is something I definitely want to put in the budget for at least non-contributors. But I guess the question I wanted maybe to propose to everyone here is whether this is something we want to have for, like, how do we want to pay maybe like current contributors? Keenan, I was just going to look at Jitsi, because you can, like on the video, you can just verify. I would love to automate that there. I kind of think that, the squad, the guild leads themselves will want to participate in DXDAO governance because that's how they're going to get paid, right? And if they want to make a request to DXDAO governance, then like they need to know what's going on. So maybe they don't need to be compensated for the governance that the way they were in the past. But I think a lot of these things about how people participate in governance, reputation, distribution is a huge one that will be a tough nut to crack going forward, because that will change completely in this new system. So I think we want to be interesting and creative about this in terms of how we encourage and incentivize this. And so, yeah, I'm going to include this still in the budget there, but I'm maybe going to pull it out into a separate post in a separate like program to try to put some more details on it there. But I'm going to probably include it as like a contingency cost, or actually might be a regular cost, but I'm going to include it in the budget and then provide details in another forum post. And yeah, maybe there were like a couple other things I know were, yeah, I think all of these are, as I said, like specific, and would love kind of some comments on them. So you can see the things we've already talked about, the DXD priorities board with established process. The same thing goes with the guild councils, right? Implementing those and kind of establishing that will be a key kind of focus operations guild. The multi-sig management system, something we've been talking about, which may eventually be transitioned over to guilds. I just talked about the DXDAO reputation distribution, and then, yeah, establishing the DXD monetary policy committee. So things you can see for governance, and then the treasury there. Actually, I think the only thing we do not have specific in here that maybe we would look for is maybe some like key milestone or goal for the contributor X squad, but maybe what we were just talking about with Gusto there for the security researcher and the swapper one, we could put something specific on there for that. Yeah, and I guess maybe just because it is like a new thing, this idea of this legal squad. So this would be something that is as we said, proposed in here is by Yarek, aka Red Hat Ross, who did the DX legal assessment. So in here, I think they would have a budget. So there would be 2 kind of parts to it. So one is having Yarek at, I think this should probably be 20% now, because we're talking about DevX stuff that may take a little bit more of his time, but he would be at 20%. And then also having a like budget for the 6 months of say like $5,000 for other legal costs. That's actually much lower than we spent before. So that may be like an undercount there, but that would be responsible for helping sure contributors can get paid, making sure the DXDAO has kept abreast on all the latest DAO developments, and then also doing a little like stakeholder risk analysis there. And yeah, hopefully that would be kind of the start of the legal squad there.
Chris, one thing I just thought of, if you go to the who makes up the guild, the guild, we already have a bit of a issue in like DXDAO in general, where people on certain squads, which we've had squads so far, some people don't have much incentive or reason or time to spend time interacting with or keeping up on other squads, right? And it's communication. There are some people that move across many squads or all squads and try to bring information between those. I'd say that that's one thing that DXBiz people do, which is important to prevent this from becoming even a larger issue with guilds, potentially product guilds and other guilds becoming very isolated. It could be interesting to, in this operations guild, there's like the 5 people you have there, and pending Eric as well, but it could make sense to have 1 or 2 people from outside of operations guild to be a part of the operation guild itself, so that those other guilds have a reason to stay involved with and pay attention, and also check what's happening in other guilds. And so having people crossing multiple guilds, I think, is actually a really valuable part. And even if they're less active in the guild, they could still be a part of the governance of that guild.
Yeah, I can see that, because you do get the siloed element there. And it's kind of a balance, right? Because what we're trying to do is basically give people both more autonomy, but we're also trying to like make people more focused on like what is actually deserves their attention. And so like moving away the contributor proposals from all of governance is because like, it's just like not worth it for us to go over individual contributor proposals on this call in front of 25 people when that's not something that we actually have good knowledge of or good perspective on. And so I think the key thing is like there's a balance to that, where you want to make sure that you're only focusing on the things that are like really necessary, but like maintaining, it's just the cross squad collaboration, like maintaining the ability to have the synergy between all of these groups, which is the real reason that you have like kind of a DXDAO, and why the DAO can hopefully function better and more efficiently.
Yeah.
So I think you do want to,
that a person from at least each product guild should have a large reason to pay attention to or even participate in the DXDAO operations guild. No?
I guess like I'm not sure if it does, right? Like, because I think a lot of people are like, I'm tired of like hearing about other squads in like a day-to-day basis. And what we need to do, I think, is create more like high-level summaries of what those squads are doing, of what those guilds are doing, and communicate those, rather than I think what we have right now, which is only like people can only drink from the fire hose of like the day-to-day grind of another squad or guild. And so then you have to really like, you're always feeling like you're behind, when really what I think we need to do is like allow the people that are like really focused on that to be doing it the whole time. But then make sure there's like periodic updates that are presented to the rest of the DAO. Yeah, Venki.
Sorry, wrong button.
Oh man, it was like perfect. I was like, this is great. Like we got a nice discussion. Venki coming in, Ross going in the chat. Right. And I think that's what's like actually really powerful about this is like the guilds are executing on things that the DAO has approved and funded, but the execution of that, while they have autonomy, it's still going to be like transparent and on chain, right? They're still going to have to send the funds in the same way. And they're still going to have to go through the process of like governing. And yes, there may be more like maybe more information or more communication is a little bit different, but like I think we still value like the kind of transparency of who's voting on these things, who's getting funded with all of these things. So there is like some visibility into that, which allows for accountability, either through if the guild is acting very maliciously. We can obviously, any of the guild members have reputation, DXDAO reputation, so you can slash that. But I also just think like it's establishing accountability for the ability on the next budget to be able to look back and be like, okay, this worked, this didn't, and we can learn from it. Yeah, and then maybe just while we're here, any kind of other, I mean, I guess Venki was kind of saying having a separate guild for Augusto and company, but yeah, so what would likely happen is that this would just kind of grow a little bit to include this like developer operations or security kind of component there. I think in the future, like with all of these, like they can be spun out into their own thing. I think that's like why it's nice to have this structure like this, because it allows any squad to like spin out into its own guild or do something that's more independent. That just requires like a bit more accountability and autonomy for the people that are like getting the funding from that to be able to be accountable to the DAO. Yeah, Gusto.
Yes. Well, the main idea will be to have our own developer operations key where we can execute purely, again, developer operations like testing experimental releases on our products, or executing tests from our from the developer operations key. Do anything, do any action that needs any interaction, or any action that is developer related, like with the technical actions that we need to execute in our products. This can be created later. The idea to have the developer operations gear on this proposal will be just to be included in this budget. But let's say in February, we can create a developer operations gear and start using it right away to test any of our stuff that we need to execute, anything that we need from the guild perspective. But for this, for the first 6 months, to be included there just to make things easier for me, and I don't have to create the proposal and deploy the guild right away. We can create it like a few months after this. I start using it. I can get paid from the operations guild budget, and the next 6 months we can use the developer operations guild. This will be just the idea to make it easier to be including the 6 months budget for now, and the next 6 months operate from our own guild.
Yeah, and this is the benefit of doing these budgets so far in advance, is we're like planning for these things that maybe we'll do in March, February, or something like that. But now that we're thinking about it and putting it down, putting it on chain, then that will like commit us to doing that going forward. So I think it's a healthy process to at least commit to it and include. And the last thing I'd say is like some of the things that Ugus was talking about, like developer relations, like that does have some overlap in terms of what the Contributor X squad is doing in terms of making this like a nice place for contributors, and also recruiting. Like a lot of the recruiting stuff is a little bit from Augusto and Melanie on that.
Yeah, on the developer operations also, well, my responsibilities will include the developer weekly calls, and also we've been having this bi-weekly developer planning calls that I think it went really well, and they help us a lot get a bit more organized. We still have a lot of work on, but there were some calls where we have been talking for 2-3 hours. So there was really the need for a place to talk about developer planning and how we are planning our resources, how we are using our development resources on DXDAO. So this will be alongside the developer operations guild, and so those will be the responsibilities, and then help on the technical planning of the products. I'm going to be helping on Benki on Swapper on the next proposal, on the next steps that we are going to propose on Swapper, that Benki is going to propose, and the Swapper team. So I'm just trying to help as much as I can there, and that will be the role of the developer operations. Hopefully in the future I won't be alone there. Right now I'm the only one there. The idea next year will be to get someone else to help me. So if I want to take some time off, right, there is going to be someone that can take care of the developer operations. So that will be my goal for next year.
Yeah, and this will some conversations that we think about the product squads and how they'll turn into guilds. We have to figure out kind of where things fall and that. So all kind of the process we're going through. I also think treasury is something that could be split up, could be spun off into a guild too, but it's kind of like the same thing where I think it's like not the right time to do it. But that one I think is more about from like a actually on-chain operational perspective. It could be very nice to have like a treasury guild that is doing things. And then Ross is saying QA is another question. I think this is probably like the biggest kind of outstanding question. Yeah, for me, we could think about how that works. Maybe that's funded through the product squads rather than through DXDAO governance, but they could have their own guild. I know Milan has talked about kind of wanting to do QA for other DAOs. So I'm not exactly sure how that all will work, but I think that's one we need to also figure out. And then there's like the DX Voice stuff that we were talking about, I think on Monday or last week.
I think QA could be part of the product squads. I think the product's using their services, so
yeah,
it's basically should be part of the squads, basically. Yeah.
And they know like what the QA needs are. Right?
Yeah.
Kind of, and it's like a little bit different than, we talk about the DX Voice, so like the marketing is like, that is a little bit more outside of like the technical project management, product development. But yeah, QA kind of fits into that more specifically. Yeah, there you go. Good. I'm glad I said that. That was like a informed opinion or formed statement. Awesome. I know we're over time here, so I want to let people go, but I definitely want to have more comments and feedback. DM me anything else here. I think we're hopefully on path for a DXgov presentation on Friday, Ross.
Yep. I'm hovering over the submit button right now on DAO Talk. I'll maybe hover over it for a bit longer. But yeah, I'll go over it on Friday as well.
Cool. And then next week we'll kind of dive into the DX Voice, Swapper, Carrot, and those. Oh, so DX Voice, but that's not the budget presentation, or is it? Yeah, right. That's
budget next week.
Yeah. So we'll hit that next week, and then this will be kind of like a rolling thing. So we want to get there'll be some changes here. As I said, I'll probably make I'm going to make a separate budget, like a V2 one of this operations guild that includes the stuff Augusto was talking about, the developer operations, kind of compare those. May make a couple other changes, but like that will be over the next week. We'll review this hopefully on this next call there, see if there are other questions, and then try to get that off while we're then, starting the process of reviewing the other ones there. So awesome. Well, a packed Friday then, I guess. And I think that's it. Anything else before we part ways? Go Argentina. I mean, that was a big, I guess, it was a big USA win. I gotta say, like, I think that's the more, it's exciting for everyone. So that was exciting. Yeah, Friday and then Saturday 9 a.m. USA versus the Netherlands.